Hey there! For those of you that don't know, my name is Taylor. I am your DM and lore master here on the Tantalus Tales.
And I am Colleen. I am a writer and also play Rouge the Rogue.
Yeah. Welcome to our second Q&A of the Tantalus Tales. These are all questions that you, the listener, have submitted, and we will try our best to answer them as accurately and spoiler-free as possible. Speaking of spoilers, if you have not watched up to episode 5, we do talk about things in episode 5, so this is your warning.
If you don't care about spoilers, I guess listen ahead.
Yeah.
But if you do, they're coming.
Yes. Thank you for submitting these. If you do not hear your question today, please keep listening because we will get to them at some point, I'm sure.
And the best way to send questions to us if you have them is at
the Tantalus Tales at gmail.com. Yeah. All right, so the first question we have is why did you choose a podcast format?
I mean, I guess we didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about other formats. There's people who do, live streams of their kind of real play campaigns. I don't know about you. That's not really my thing. It doesn't add a whole lot, I think, to see, the dice being rolled and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I like to multitask a lot. So I'm super fond of the podcast format just because, you can listen to it when you're driving or at work or things like that. And I don't know. I thought it was a fitting format for what we wanted to do.
Yes, and having 4 people in different areas really makes it easier to do it as a podcast as opposed to a video stream all at our house. And if you notice the convenient placing of the camera, I don't want to show you my house. And for those of you, some of you have brought it up. Yes, we have seen the Adventure Zone, and that is partially a reason why we decided to go with podcast formation, because I had listened to some D&D podcasts in the past, and they were mostly just people sitting around a table you'd hear every dice roll and pencil scratch, and after listening to the Adventure Zone and realizing that, yeah, you can do a D&D podcast with just story-based, I really enjoyed that and thought, yeah, this idea I've got would factor into a podcast really well. And so that's partially why we decided with it.
Huh. All right. On to our second question. What's the hardest part of DMing? Also, what is the easiest part of DMing?
Oof. Well, I gotta say the easiest part that we have is that we have Kelly, Spencer, and Connor are incredibly helpful in the fact that we do have a overarching story, and they don't really stray too far from that.
Definitely the hardest times to DM, not necessarily in this particular instance. With this campaign that we're running is sometimes you have a party that just isn't very interested in the story or is, I don't know, actively opposed in some situations, which can make DMing very difficult.
Yes.
But in this case, we have a very good party, which makes things relatively easy. As far as the hardest part, there are certainly times when they do things that are unexpected, where you've prepared for a few different circumstances, and then they kind of go in a completely different direction than you ever would have expected. Not necessarily a bad direction. A lot of the things that they've decided, I think, have made the story very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes when you're kind of taken aback as a DM by something that kind of isn't one of the predetermined directions that you thought your party would go.
Yeah. And I know we are entirely guilty of being players who derail a campaign. Sorry, Justin. But as fun as that can be, that type of play isn't as effective as a story-driven thing where you have an active audience listening to how it goes. It'd be like, I don't know, like actors in Game of Thrones going off script completely, and suddenly they just all now live in the place that isn't Westeros. I don't know Game of Thrones, I'm sorry.
You tried. It does, I think, also help that we kind of work together to figure out how to react to situations. So while you're, the booming voice of the DM, we do a lot of kind of background chat when the party starts doing things that we don't expect. So
yes.
The whole time we're kind of, chatting with each other.
Yeah.
Back and forth, trying to figure out what to do when everything has gone horribly awry.
Yes. So if there is any point in the podcast in which you're like, oh yeah, Taylor handled that really, really well, that was probably Colleen from the background, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, no, it's incredibly easy with this group because they are actively trying to assist in telling this story that we've got. So I guess I haven't really run into any major issues as a DM. It's been a blast for me. Our next question comes as a question regarding Spider. If you have listened to episode 5, we introduced a character called Spider. That is with an I and not an I, and that's Speyeder. Spider is inspired by a real-life individual who we know, our friend Matt Ullman, who unfortunately passed away back in February, and from the Tantalus Tales infancy, before I think we even called it the Tantalus Tales, Matt was crucial in sculpting and getting this all situated for us, because up until then we had no idea how to do anything podcast related, and Matt just so happened to have been podcasting for years and was a treasure trove of knowledge in that fact. And so when we decided that we wanted to do a D&D podcast, we knew we wanted to include Matt somehow, and after his passing we knew we had to memorialize him as a character, and we figured why not. His online persona was a character named Spider, so we took that and made him a tinkerer, made Spider a tinkerer, and a very, very fun person to play.
Other than Spider, we haven't really had any characters who are inspired any more than the name, I guess, by kind of real life characters. We've had a couple characters that are named for kind of friends or people that we know from real life, but that's where the comparison ends.
Like Sheriff Hartley in the first chapter was named after a good friend of mine named Thomas Hartley, and I think so far that's the only ones that have been named. Oh no, that's not entirely true. Spider is not the only one that's based in reality, because also Nicola the Tabaxi is named for our cat in not only name but personality. Our cat, a little orange, for lack of a better term, asshole. Nicola, our cat, cat's name is Tesla, named after Nikola Tesla. And Nicola's a lot of fun to write for because it's really, whenever I'm wondering what Nikola would say to the characters, I'm always thinking about what my cat would say if he could talk. And anyone that's met Tesla can vouch for the fact that he's
cold and unaffectionate.
Yeah.
Kind of mean.
Yeah. So Spider and Nicola.
He's cute though, so.
He is cute, and if you listen to episode 5, you know that Kelly had a real hard time not bursting out into kitties, because I'm pretty sure I know most of us have cats. I don't think Connor has a cat, but I'm not certain.
Yes, everyone else certainly
everyone
has
else
cats.
Has cats.
We're a cat-friendly
podcast. Not that we're not fond of dogs, but amongst the 4 of us, I think we have like 12 cats.
I mean, we have 1 cat. I don't know. I cannot speak for the others.
But yeah, Nicola and Spider are based in reality. We do have some characters coming up named for people in reality, and we have our first soiree into satire coming up, which I'm quite excited to see on somebody in the real world. Next question we got is, why didn't Rouge save Richard as well?
I don't think Rouge ever had the intention to leave Richard behind. I don't think that was ever her goal. I think it was largely just due to circumstance that they found out that things were much worse than anticipated and kind of had a small chance to make a backdoor exit and was able kind of to do that at the last minute, and unfortunately Richard was not able to be brought along. I think if she was able to, she definitely would have saved more people.
Yes, and it has nothing to do with it being written that way.
Yes, I mean, we decided that was how it was going to be, so if you didn't like that, I'm sorry.
I mean, I suppose that does come from the fact that we named Richard the Crimson after the red shirts of Star Trek. So
yeah, we definitely knew Richard's fate from the very beginning.
Yeah, but he was fun to play. Wasn't very lucky with the dice though.
Our next question is, what are some of your favorite moments from the Tantalus Tales?
Well, I think, well, going back and listening to the episodes, because now if you're unaware, we are on different streaming sites.
And we're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, others soon. If you have any other particular favorite places to listen to podcasts and we're not there, let us know and we can definitely make that happen for you.
But listening to the previous episodes has brought out some pretty funny moments that I almost completely forgot about. Like, one of my favorites is the ending of episode 3, after somebody calls for Winnie the Hoot, and Spencer, without dropping a dime, I really wanted to end it just on the person calling for Winnie the Hoot, and Spencer, just in true Orenthal fashion, just uh-oh. And there's about a full minute of laughter from myself that I had to cut out. A lot of my laughter is left on the editing room floor because these three are hilarious when you let them rip, and I laugh far too much in this. Most of my track is laughter and monologuing. Laughter and monologuing are my two factors, which I enjoy these guys completely, and they have. I have had to tell them specifically that if they think of something funny to say, feel free to interrupt me. If they wanted to let me monologue, I was like, no, please don't. I love hearing my own voice, but if you got a joke, let it rip. Do you have any favorite moments?
I definitely agree with the Winnie the Hoot was a great one. Similarly, I think when we introduced Dewey, the librarian, I wasn't sure how they would react. I thought perhaps they'd go the more murder hobo route and just be like, "Oh, there's a big monster in the library, you gotta attack it." But Bakar just being like, "Oh, Bakar says hello," was very surprising. It was not the path I thought they would take, but I was pleasantly surprised. They definitely learned from their first experience with the hungry wolves that maybe non-violent solutions could also be the answer.
Yeah. We did have what would have ended up being a brief fight scene written out for them with Dewey, but they took the higher route, I guess, which surprised the hell out of me. Our next question we've got: what has been your favorite NPC to write? And speaking of Dewey, Dewey was one of my favorite NPCs to write. And that, I think, got replaced with Spider, because Spider has been a blast to write, and I can only hope that I do Matt's memory proud, because Matt was an extremely humorous fellow, and I've enjoyed playing Spider, so I hope you guys enjoy Spider as well. The other favorite on my list currently is someone that hasn't shown up yet, who will be debuting in the next episode, episode 6. So see if you can guess it, because I'm excited for that one. So you have some favorites too, haven't you, that you've written?
Dewey definitely was one of the favorites kind of early on. I think that was kind of the first thinking of kind of funny NPCs to come up with. After Dewey, I think my favorite is also one that will be coming up in a future episode, which I will not spoil for everyone. So
I can't really think of any NPCs that I didn't enjoy writing. Another one high up on the list was Bessie Blomp.
Bessie was very fun. Blomp Bessie was very much inspired by our homeland of Minnesota.
Yeah. The
only NPC I think I've been disappointed writing was probably the gnomish bard that we had in a tavern that we went to a lot of trouble to give backstory, and then the players just entirely ignored, which was a little sad.
Yeah.
We even wrote him a song, and
I mean, to be fair, the song was creepy.
It was terrifying. So I understand why they avoided the gnome, but that has been the only NPC disappointment thus far.
I fully expected them to talk to the bard as well, but we had backstory and different arcs that they could take with the bard, but they didn't take him. They just ignored the hell out of him. Which, I mean, I suppose I probably would have done too, honestly.
Yeah, a little scary.
But our next question deals with the vastness of our world. And if you have listened to episode 5, you will know that the players are on what we're calling the fractured space.
Essentially, a space between the different planes, kind of a neutral territory of sorts.
Yeah, on the space shuttle, the Tantalus Institute, space space station, I guess would be more accurate than space shuttle.
Space station.
Which is exciting, and I think, what is it? I think episode 7 will be our first jump into a new plane of existence, which I'm excited to see how everyone takes it.
If you're interested in the plane jumping, kind of seeing different worlds, that's definitely something that we have in store for you without spoiling too much.
Mm-hmm. I do have a notebook full of different places to go for the players if they decide to do anything with that. If they don't, well, then I did a lot of writing for nothing. But the next question I have is asking about any teasers coming up for things, and I think we've dropped a few breadcrumbs here and there throughout this.
We let you know we got a bit of a satirical NPC, some plane jumping. Those are definitely things that you can expect in the future, but I don't want to spoil too much of the story that's coming up, so I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, because the players could do something completely different, and then
it's hard to know exactly. As we said, we mentioned that some things might come up in episode 7, but that's only as far as we can predict. It might go very differently than we expect.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no. Keep an eye on the horizon. Things are going to be interesting. I'm excited to see what you all think of the upcoming events.
Yes, we've had a lot of fun writing kind of the next big arc, the next big adventure for.
Yeah, chapter 2. Chapter 2 will be exciting. I've been excited. I was initially really excited to see how you all took them getting essentially beamed up, and I've had some good reviews from it. So, but speaking of being beamed up, I did have somebody ask me why the Tantalus Institute. Why is it called the Tantalus Institute? And I mean, we are the Tantalus Tales. So, yeah. And we are the Tantalus Tales because of an old character I used to play, who was a tiefling rogue who was pretty much a bard.
Yeah, the very, very stereotypical kind of bard that just messes with the party constantly.
Yeah, I had a blast playing him, and that's a story for another day. He goes all over the place. Has shown up in other people's DM campaigns, D&D campaigns, excuse me, that have nothing to do with our campaigns, which makes me extremely happy. But anywho, that is the gist of the questions we have for you for this installment of our Tantalus Tales Q&A.
Thank you to all of the patrons. Obviously, if you're listening, you are one of our patrons. So we'd like to say thank you. Of course, the support in sharing the podcast and leaving reviews on places like iTunes is really, really great. But we'd like to thank you for kind of going above and beyond. The support that you give us through Patreon allows us to make the podcast better by spending more time on it and getting things like better equipment. It supports things like just hosting the podcast, so we have the ability to make it available to you.
Yeah. And as financial supporters, you're essentially producers of our show. And for that, we like to include you in on some of the things that we do. And we're glad that we have this back and forth feedback type of relationship with you all. And again, thank you for doing that, because the feedback that I get from you all really makes me feel like I do better as a DM and host of this, and I don't think I would be as good without feedback from you all. So thank you. Before we go, I do want to. I mean, they're probably not going to see it because I don't think they're a Patreon supporter of ours. But I really want to send a shout out to the Dice Nest for their fantastic fan art. It's in the newsletter, so you can take a look at that. Some of you may have seen it on Facebook already or Twitter, and they are an incredible artist, and I'm really happy that they made this for us, because one of the things when we had initially gotten started with this podcast and stuff, one of my like goal posts was that that I measure success in honestly is if somebody were to create art based on the Tantalus Tales, I feel like I honestly could die happy at this point.
No, we made it.
We've done it. We're done. This is the end of the podcast, honestly. Yeah.
You should definitely check out the Dice Nest, though. They got some really adorable art that's available. Some little snakes that are dressed up as all the different Dungeons and Dragons classes and other fun stuff.
And they do make dice as well. They do have a store. All of the links to said stores can be found on their Twitter, which is at the Dice Nest. Yes. They're also on Instagram, and go show them some Tantalus love. I know. I believe they're actually also going to be a sponsor on the 8th, and we also have another sponsor who we're very excited to work with. Another D&D roleplay-esque podcast that's starting up on Friday.
But not D&D.
Not D&D. Monster of the Week. Monster of the Week. Thornvale Podcast. The Thornvale Podcast. They are fantastic. They're doing a Monster of the Week. I think, if I'm not mistaken, set in like Florida. So I'm excited to listen to it. We got some early recordings to listen to from them as being a beginner supporter of them. So there will be more. You can see that. Our next episode will be going up on the 8th. That is this upcoming Wednesday. And we will do our best to make sure that our next Q&A comes out closer to mid-month instead of teetering over the edge into the next month, because I'm really bad at doing things like that. I looked at the calendar and realized it was May. So I hope this being a little longer than our previous Q&A will suffice as an apology from us. And we will promise to do better in the future. But hey, thank you again. And we look forward to hearing your opinions on, I guess, episode 6 and 7, probably, before we get the next one out. So, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your whatever day, time, hour it is. Thank you again for listening to the Tantalus Tales. You can find us wherever, and we'll see you again.